Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Rival Recon here on Anfield Index Pro. I'm Hari Sethi. It's all come down to this, listeners. Arne Slot's league-leading Reds are a mere 1 point away from clinching Liverpool's 20th league title, and doing so in front of a packed Anfield for the first time in decades. All the toil, all the composure, and it comes down to a match against Ange Postecoglou's struggling Spurs this Sunday afternoon at Anfield. And joining me on this week's pod, I'm delighted to welcome on London football writer for Goal, Sean Walsh, as he takes us through what's been a dispiriting season for Spurs fans, with an injury-decimated squad and a manager who's seemingly been drained of much of his initial optimism. Could they possibly cause an upset on Sunday, or with more European commitments on the horizon, will they end up having a great seat to watch the Reds clinch the title in style? Welcome on, Sean. Good to speak with you.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
No, I appreciate it. I know just before we hit record, we were speaking a little bit about the kind of the format of the show, talking a bit about my own allegiances as well. Having grown up in North London, could easily have been Arsenal, could easily have been Tottenham, just because of my dad was the reason why I ended up supporting Liverpool. You referred to it as almost like a bit of a crossroads.
Definitely, yeah.
And I guess after this season, yeah, perhaps it's like it feels even more kind of emphasized. But yeah, what I was saying to you is I really do want to get your opinion on just like how the season has unfolded and why it's unfolded as it has. I've got my own kind of perception of it based on what I'd seen as Spurs, like, and what I've read and things like that. But before we go into the specifics, I just wanted to ask you, at this stage of the season, with of course more still to fight for, I suppose, in Europe, and that's I suppose where all the that's where all the sort of ducks are in the basket, or eggs are in the basket rather, for the European competition. Where's your head at this point in the season? You referred to Spurs as a little bit of a basket case of a club before we went live.
I think it's such a strange position that Spurs are in now because, particularly in the post-Pochettino era, every season with like the serial winning managers with Mourinho and Conte and even Nuno for a little bit, the question was always, would you take finishing way lower down the table if that meant you won a trophy? And for years, like kind of Spurs fans debated nonsense, like why do we need to pick between the two? And as it so happens now, the team have basically picked between the two. So it's weird to kind of be living out that reality, but the heads are firmly focused on Europa League one for sure. Ideally, don't finish as low in the Premier League as possible. It's gotten to a ridiculous point with ourselves and Manchester United, but now there's like a real chance to try and save the season. And there's not usually a case that Spurs are in this situation. They've been to a couple of Carabao Cup finals and obviously played Liverpool in the Champions League final, but that was once in the last however many years that Spurs have got to the end of the season and are still in a semi-final of this kind of competition. So it's new in that sense that there is still something to fight for there, and it could very well turn the season around, but it's not been great at this point. It really hasn't. You can ask, you'll probably start picking and probing in a minute, but there's so many different places that we could really start on, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, actually, what I wanted to start on is probably previous conversations I've had with Spurs guests on this show, which have had obviously been during those tenures of the likes of Mourinho, Conte, and as you mentioned, those managers who came in more dispassionate, but it was about okay, they're winners, etc., etc. And one thing that ended up happening, well, by the time the end of Conte certainly, was some of the Spurs guests I had on were talking about, well, actually, kind of what I want as a Spurs fan is to enjoy things again and to feel that the manager of the club wants to be at the club and doesn't view the club as some sort of diversion in their career on the way to other things. And that's certainly, I think, by the end of Mourinho's tenure there, certainly by the end of Conte's tenure there, like, was the impression that those managers were giving, which I thought obviously translated to the team, translated to the fans. And so when Ange joined, and of course, certainly with the early enthusiasm as well, a lot of that joy seemed to be back in terms of, yeah, we might be a bit of a chaotic team at times, but there's loads of things to enjoy here. Do you think a lot of that kind of positivity has been lost this season just because of the the results more than anything? and then we can get into sort of why the results have been that way. But I'm interested, sort of like just where perception is on Ange, because I get the odd snippet here and there from friends and family, but I also get snippets from the media. But I'm interested in your opinion on sort of where you think he's currently at with the fan base.
You nailed it perfectly when you're talking about where the fan base kind of was after those Mourinho and Conte reigns, where I think the club did at least a good job of recognizing, okay, whoever the next guy is needs to be this kind of unifying figure who everyone can kind of come around and be galvanized under. And I think there was a good piece in The Athletic today at the time of recording about Arnie Slot nearly taking the job and then changing his mind. So, there's another crossroads there. I think with Ange, there's been a kind of almost a widespread sort of disappointment with how it's gone, because everyone did love him at first. It didn't take a lot for Spurs fans to get on board with what he was trying to do, and when results started to follow, it made it seem like a no-brainer, right? Like you win, I think it was 7 out of the first 9 or 10 games start of last season. The football was incredible. You think, okay, yeah, this is it. This is the future. And if you went back to then, at the point where Spurs went 1-0 up against Chelsea, and if you remember that manic game where Spurs end with 9 men and Chelsea win 4-1 after a brilliant chance, the mental high line and things like that. If you go back to the point where Spurs were 1 up in that game and dominating, and you said Postecoglou will lose, I can't remember what the stats are. It's a ridiculous kind of stat where he's lost most of his games since then, and April next season, you're going to be 16th in the league. They would think, what the hell has happened for that to have been the case? Because even coming into this season, I was generally quite optimistic coming into this season. Not necessarily that the trophy drought might end or there might be Champions League football, but Spurs will continue playing the way they can. There's still an identity. There's a lot of young players coming through. Let's see how it goes. I thought at the very worst, it would be maybe, okay, 7th or 8th, but still got the style, still got some players coming through. There's enough here to work with. This is beyond what fans thought could be the worst case scenario in the Premier League. This is ridiculous. 18 losses is almost indefensible. There's a very, very small group of fans who are still totally behind Postecoglou, where I think that a lot of them apparently are on Blue Sky, and I have Blue Sky, but I'm not like a frequent user the way I am on Twitter. Over there, it sounds like there's a lot of people still Postecoglou in. And matches is a bit more divided. Even until around February time, his name was getting sung in the stands, but the feeling has kind of dissipated since. I myself like him as a guy. I have my reservations over whether he should be the manager of Tottenham Hotspur. And it's kind of where a lot of people have landed, I think, where you can like him as a guy. Even if he wins the Europa League, can respect what he's done, but clearly the way that he is trying to build a football team is not sustainable in the Premier League. And it's really, it's tough for Spurs fans, because it means that got to go back to the drawing board in the summer and get another manager to come and be the face of the project. And whoever it's going to be won't be as good as the names have come before. So yeah, it's been quite a rough season where, you get back up and you get kicked in the gut. I think Ange said it himself basically, where he said, every time I think there's light at the end of the tunnel, there's an oncoming train. I think that kind of sums up the whole season in his reign perfectly.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to go back to that game against Chelsea. As you mentioned, it's a pretty like chaotic game into how it ended up transpiring. That down to 9 players maintaining that high line, which we'll come back to. My lingering memory of that game was obviously Nico Jackson scored a hat-trick in the end, didn't he? And I think he did the Sue celebration when he finally scored the hat-trick, and I was like, the fact that you've got the audacity to do that after 60 minutes of the most brain-dead performance I've ever seen, or was it number 9, like against the high line, where you could see Raheem Sterling pleading with him to just like, look, just do this. I'm going to make this run. You hold your line. It's going to be a tap-in. And he eventually figured it out. But yeah, I think that that is my lingering memory of that game. Not Spurs' decision to continue playing the high line, but just Nico Jackson not quite realizing that even if you played FIFA for a little bit, like you know what to do here. Just like, it's a simple thing. But the high line, I suppose, is actually more relevant to our discussion, right? Because it's been a theme of this season, and I do want to get on to talking about injuries and just how much of a hand behind the back injuries became in terms of actually expecting more from the team this season. You could tell me how true that is or not, but that kind of devotion to a particular philosophy, a tactical approach, the high wire act, which bore lots of attacking fruit at its best, but also of course leaked lots of goals. I suppose that game against Chelsea is a good example of it in terms of sort of like most teams or most coaches would have approached maybe that situation a bit differently. I remember at the time he got praise for it from some quarters and criticism from other quarters. And this season, it seems like there's been...
All right, the Reds, it's Jack here, and that was a clip from one of Anfield Index's audio podcasts. If you have enjoyed the video, make sure you do like, share, and subscribe to keep up to date on all things LFC. We record around 100 audio podcasts every month, with our shows featuring match-going fans, top journalists, professional analysts, and even Liverpool legends along the way. With the Great Dane himself, Jan Molby, joining us every single week. If you want to listen to all our podcasts for free, head over to anfieldindex.com/podcasts. Our audio shows are available wherever you get your podcasts. Just search Anfield Index. Or if you prefer to listen to all our podcasts in full and without any ads, why not head over to AI Pro today to check it out now at anfieldindexpro.com. If you want to get involved in the great growing community of Liverpool fans, check out the Anfield Index Discord. The link is in the description. Do get involved with that from Reds around every corner of the globe. For now, Reds, hope you enjoyed this video.